The psychology of nightmares. The truth hidden in nightmares. Have you ever woken up from a nightmare feeling shaken, disturbed, or even haunted only to brush it off as just a bad dream? What if it wasn't just a dream but a message? In this powerful exploration of depth psychology, we dive into the hidden meaning of nightmares and how they reflect repressed emotions, unhealed trauma, and forgotten truths within us. Drawing on Carl Jung's theory of the unconscious and shadow self, we'll uncover why nightmares don't come to harm, but to awaken. You'll learn how recurring dreams, terrifying symbols, and sleep paralysis may actually be your psyche's way of calling you back to wholeness, from ancient myths like Lilith to modern trauma therapy. This video reveals how facing your inner darkness can lead to emotional healing and self-understanding. Nightmares aren't mistakes. They're mirrors. Are you ready to see what's really inside? When the darkness in sleep speaks, the true meaning of nightmares. All of us have experienced a nightmare. It's not just a frightening dream that jolts us awake in the middle of the night, heart racing and cold sweat running down our spine. It is also a deep cut into the unconscious, a place where unacknowledged pain, repressed memories, and buried emotions find a way to speak out. Nightmares are unlike ordinary dreams. They occur less frequently, but their impact is so intense that they can haunt us for years, sometimes a lifetime. They often come as vivid fragments, falling from great heights, being chased, feeling trapped, unable to scream. The feeling upon waking is not just fear, but a disoriented chaos, as if something deep inside is screaming, yet we don't know what it is. In modern culture, nightmares are often seen as signs of psychological distress. People seek out sleeping pills, try to forget, or avoid them altogether. But according to many psychoanalysts, especially Carl Jung, this might be a mistake, because nightmares don't come to harm us. They come to awaken us. They are the knocking of the inner darkness, inviting us to pause, listen, and face what lies beneath. A nightmare is a doorway into the deepest unconscious parts of the self. It reveals what we haven't yet had the courage to confront in our waking lives. It could be the fear of abandonment, guilt, fear of failure, or old wounds that have never been healed. When darkness speaks, it's not an ending, it's the beginning of a journey back to yourself, through what you fear the most. Not all fears should be eliminated. What nightmares come to remind you in today's world? We tend to eliminate anything uncomfortable. We avoid sadness, suppress anger, and numb our pain. Nightmares are no exception. When a dream jolts us awake in pain or panic, the common response is to treat it like a system error in need of quick fixing. People turn to sleep aids, lucid dreaming techniques, or simply try to forget. But perhaps we're missing something crucial. What if, instead of seeing nightmares as something to eliminate, we saw them as messages, as mental alarms signaling that something inside us has been neglected for too long? It could be an emotion never acknowledged, an inner conflict being denied. And when your conscious mind refuses to see it, the unconscious finds another path to speak through nightmares. Many psychologists have warned that by focusing only on eliminating nightmares without listening to their message, we lose a chance to deeply understand ourselves. The disturbing dream might be the only moment when a repressed part of you gets to speak. As Carl Jung once said, dreams are natural, unedited products of the unconscious, and they are pure truth. They don't tell you what to do, they simply show you what you've forgotten. Nightmares often emerge during prolonged stress, when we live out of alignment with our true values, or when a deep wound remains unhealed. They're not just symptoms, they're reminders. And if you have the courage not to look away, you may realize at the heart of that nightmare is a door. Behind it is not just darkness, but a forgotten part of you waiting to be held, seen, and reclaimed. We cannot heal what we keep seeing as the enemy. And not all fear should be eradicated. Some fears come to wake you, not from sleep, but from the forgetting of your true self. When the unconscious speaks in symbols, the metaphorical language of nightmares, have you ever dreamt of falling endlessly without ever hitting the ground, standing in front of a crowd, unable to speak, running from someone, but your legs won't move? These dreams may seem different on the surface, but in fact, they speak the same language, the language of symbolism. Nightmares, from a psychoanalytic view, are not merely fearful experiences. They are emotional maps encoded in symbols. They do not speak in words, but in images, drama, and archetypes tied to human experience. And this makes nightmares immensely valuable if you know how to listen. Let's reflect on some of the most common nightmare images. Falling freely often represents a loss of control in life, or lack of solid grounding in relationships, career, or personal beliefs. Being exposed or unprepared in front of a crowd relates to fear of judgment, shame, or feeling inadequate. Being unable to scream or move in danger symbolizes powerlessness, repressed emotion, or being overwhelmed by external forces. Being chased by a dark figure is frequently the image of your inner shadow, a part of yourself you are afraid to confront. Carl Jung once said, "Dreams do not lie, but they do not speak logically. They speak the language of symbols." This means you cannot decode a dream with logic alone. You need intuition and the courage to feel. In nightmares, images are the keys. They are not just things happening to you, they are you, in another form. The pursuer may be your own fear. The terrifying monster could be your rejected emotions. And the crying child left behind in the dream might be you at some forgotten moment in the past. When you start asking questions of these symbols, why did I dream this? What have I been avoiding in real life? The nightmare is no longer something to fear. It becomes a mirror, a flashlight into the deepest layer of your psyche. And there, you may find the most precious thing of all, the forgotten truth about who you are. Lilith, the banished lover of darkness and humanity's ancient fear, in the long-haunted nights of humanity, the image of a woman appears fierce, free, defiant. Her name is Lilith Long. Before nightmares took the form we know today, Lilith was already their first incarnation, a speaking shadow, a force exiled from the order of civilization. According to ancient Jewish lore, Lilith was Adam's first wife, not Eve, but she refused to submit. She believed she was equal to Adam. As both were made from the same dust, such equality in the ancient world was intolerable. Lilith was cast out of Eden, and from that moment, she became a terrifying symbol in the human psyche, a woman who would not bow. Lilith did not disappear in collective fear. She transformed into a named nightmare, the one who chokes you in your sleep, who seduces men by night, who disturbs dreams with sex, fear, and death. She is the predecessor of what we now call succubi female spirits, who lure men in their sleep and drain their life force. Even the word nightmare was once tied to Mara, a night demon who sits on the chest of dreamers, paralyzing them in terror. Pause for a moment and reflect. Why is a woman who is autonomous and demands equality turned into a symbol of horror? The answer isn't in Lilith, it's in us. In our deep fear of what we cannot control, in our fear of parts of ourselves that are too wild, too passionate, too honest, so we call them monsters and exile them into dreams. Lilith is the symbol of the shadow within each of us, the part rejected because it doesn't fit the roles we're expected to play in daily life. But here's the twist. What we try hardest to banish comes back stronger in dreams. Not to harm us, but to force us to face it. A nightmare in the shape of Lilith is your unconscious asking, are you living true to your inner freedom? Or are you living the way others expect you to? Some fear Lilith, others call her a guide, because only when we dare to face the exiled image can we begin the true journey of healing, not just from fear, but from the inner split in our own soul. Sleep, the biological gateway to a chaotic inner world. Each night, as we close our eyes, we step into another world. No traffic, no schedules, no social roles, only one thing remains: the raw, unfiltered self. But that world does not open randomly. It follows a precise order, a biological rhythm orchestrated by the brain, and it is within this cycle that nightmares find their path. Human sleep occurs in phases, from light to deep, from stillness to storm. We begin in non-REM sleep, where the body slows down, heart rate drops, and temperature lowers. This is the bridge between wakefulness and hazy unconsciousness. Then comes deep sleep, where the body repairs itself, but it is during the REM rapid eye movement phase that everything changes. In REM sleep, Your body is nearly paralyzed, yet the brain lights up like a stage play. This is when the most vivid dreams occur and when nightmares often appear. Though REM comprises only 20–25% of adult sleep, it is the richest realm of the unconscious here. Forgotten memories, unprocessed emotions, and rejected shadow parts of ourselves emerge through dreams. Children have higher REM percentages than adults. That's why it's not surprising. They often dream of monsters, abandonment, or surreal images at an age when logic is still undeveloped. The dream world feels like a real part of life where anything can happen, but over time, as we grow up and become rational, we begin to do something we deny. We learn to ignore emotion, suppress intuition, and conform to expectations at that point. Dreams become the only mirror bold enough to reflect the parts of life we avoid. Nightmares don't appear out of nowhere. They are the result of accumulated tension, unspoken truths, repressed conflicts, and when the brain enters REM where barriers dissolve, those things rise. No longer restrained by reason, they don't come to punish, but to remind something inside needs to be heard. Understanding the biology of sleep lets us see nightmares differently, not as flaws to fix, but as signals from a wise system, a psychological body striving for balance. Dreams are not meaningless. Nightmares are not excess. They are whispers of the soul, translated through the biological rhythms of a living mind. And when we begin to listen not just to sleep better, but to know ourselves, sleep is no longer a retreat. It becomes a gateway inward, where darkness is not the enemy, but the most honest companion we have. The dream of the dying horse. When Raskolnikov confronts his brutality, some dreams are not mere reflections of fear, but indictments from the conscience in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. The main character, Raskolnikov, experiences a nightmare so brutal and tearful that it remains one of the most psychoanalytically rich dreams in modern literature. In the dream, a 7-year-old Raskolnikov is walking with his father when they witness a group of drunken peasants brutally beating a frail horse. They load a wagon too heavy for it to carry and lash it with whips and sticks until it collapses in blood. Surrounded by cruel laughter, the boy rushes forward, crying, hugging the broken body of the horse. Unable to understand how people could be so merciless, the question bursts from his throat. Father, why are they doing this? Then Raskolnikov wakes drenched in sweat, panicked his conscience, screamed through the dream, for in real life, he was plotting a murder to kill a greedy pawnbroker. Believing himself worthy of transcending conventional morality, he justified it in the name of justice that one evil act could yield a greater good. But the dream shattered that mask of logic. The little horse in the dream symbolized the vulnerable human part he had rejected while cloaking himself in a superior ideal. The mob represented a barbaric society he claimed to be above but was secretly complicit in. And the boy, the one crying in agony, was Raskolnikov's pure soul, which he was burying beneath cold intellect. Dostoevsky did not write this dream for literary beauty. He wrote it as a raw vision of what happens when one loses connection to conscience. Dreams don't lie. They bring us to our weakest point, because that is where healing must begin. Raskolnikov's nightmare is a perfect example of the wake-up mechanism in depth psychology, when ego becomes arrogant. The unconscious pulls us back with images we can't ignore. The dream didn't stop him from killing, but it planted the seed of redemption. And that journey began the moment he embraced the dying horse in his dream. And have you ever seen in a dream the part of yourself that's hurting yet in waking life? You've never faced it. That may be where your resurrection begins, not by fixing yourself to meet others' expectations, but by listening to the part of you that's been left behind. Kafka and the Tragedy of Invisibility. When nightmares become life itself. Some nightmares don't happen during sleep. They seep silently into waking life. Where people rise each morning but don't truly live. Franz Kafka, the existential writer, portrayed such nightmares where fear was not about monsters, but about the vanishing of the self in a senseless, indifferent world. In The Trial, the character Joseph K. is suddenly arrested one morning for no known reason. No one explains his charges. No court date is given. and the legal system seems like a ghost, existing only to push him into helplessness. Joseph K. is not tortured or physically imprisoned, but he is crushed by the unknown, by the absurdity he cannot see or change. Similarly, in the Metamorphosis, Gregor Samsa wakes to find himself transformed into a giant insect, but the most terrifying part is not the transformation. It's how the world reacts. His family comes to see him as a burden, a grotesque thing. No one hears him. No one sees him as human eventually. Gregor forgets he ever was one. Kafka did not write about nightmares to induce horror. He wrote about the collapse of meaning, about the state where people breathe, work, and behave properly, yet feel no connection to themselves. This is the nightmare of the modern age, when meaning is replaced by routine, the soul by social roles, and presence by duty and expectation. Kafka's works urge us to ask, are we also living in a strange dream, where we're no longer someone, just a part of the system? Do we wake each day, fulfill responsibilities, yet feel like strangers in our own lives? The nightmare in Kafka does not come from outside, it comes from within, from the rupture between the true self and the roles we play, from the quiet dying of the soul within prepackaged identities. And perhaps Kafka's deepest message of healing is not found in the tragedy but in awareness. When we begin to recognize the absurdity and emptiness in a life on autopilot, we have a chance to pause and ask, who am I in this system? Why am I really here? That is not the end of the nightmare. It is the door to awakening. When forgotten memories return at night, nightmares and psychological trauma, not all nightmares are born from the metaphysical or abstract symbols. Some take the shape of memory raw, real, and buried for those who have experienced psychological trauma. Sleep is no longer a place of rest. It becomes a battlefield where the past returns without knocking, without warning. In psychology, this is known as post-traumatic nightmares, a hallmark of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Individuals who have endured accidents, abuse, war, sudden loss often find themselves reliving the experience in their dreams. The scene replays with haunting detail, the sights, the sounds, the emotions, even the smells of the moment. It all returns, as if it never left. To outsiders, a nightmare may just seem like a bad dream, but for the wounded, it is an inner earthquake, shaking loose fear, helplessness, guilt, and despair, feelings too deep for words. What's even more painful is that many trauma survivors don't realize they are living with PTSD. They only know they can't sleep peacefully, that every time they close their eyes, something terrifying returns. But why would the mind do this? Is the unconscious punishing them? No, quite the opposite. Nightmares are the mind's effort to heal what has never been named. Trauma lives in the dark because it's been locked there too long. When the unconscious brings it back through dreams, it's trying to say, look at this, stop turning away. Modern trauma therapists like Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, and Gabor Mate all emphasize that telling, writing, and safely sharing traumatic memories is the most vital step toward healing. Writing out nightmares is a form of release, a way to bring haunting images out of the shadows and into the light of understanding. The paradox is, the more we avoid trauma, the more it haunts us. But if we dare to enter it, to ask questions, to tell the story in our own words, then the nightmare begins to change. It becomes less terrifying, less chaotic, and sometimes it goes silent. No one can erase painful memories, but we can learn to live with them without letting them control us. The dream doesn't come to punish. It comes to extend a hand, not to pull you down, but to help you look at the place where you once fell and begin to stand again. Because sometimes healing doesn't begin in the light. It begins the moment we dare to open our eyes in the dark. Dreams that know the truth, Jung and the meaningful coincidences. Have you ever had a dream so strange it gave you chills only to later see it unfold in real life? An accident A reunion A scene, so exact in light, setting, and feeling that it felt uncanny. Moments like these make us pause and ask, was that just coincidence? Or did the dream know something beyond time? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, called these moments synchronicity, meaningful coincidences. This is when the inner world dreams, images, emotions, intuitions aligns with the outer world real events in ways that defy normal cause and effect for Jung. Prophetic dreams were not magic, they were gateways into the mysterious depths of the psyche. In his work, Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle, Jung described his own terrifying dream: golden waves, sinking ships, floating bodies, war, and blood. Just weeks later, World War I broke out. Jung didn't claim to be a prophet instead. He asked, was the collective unconscious already sensing the tremors of an imminent reality? Such foresight dreams are rare, but when they occur, they awaken awe. Maybe they don't always predict the future in the cinematic way we imagine, but they reveal that the inner and outer worlds are not as separate as we believe. The unconscious often feels movements that consciousness hasn't yet recognized, like deep water sensing a storm long before the surface ripples. In therapeutic practice, many clients have recorded dreams that seem meaningless at first, only to later see them mirror what was unfolding in real life: a breakup, betrayal, a crisis. These events didn't happen because of the dream. They were already forming, and the subconscious caught wind first. Jung emphasized, the value of a dream lies not in whether it's right or wrong, but in how it brings forth what reason has overlooked a different perspective, a clue, a warning, a whisper of hope. When we record and reflect on our dreams as if reading encrypted letters, we are training a sacred skill, listening to the deepest part of ourselves. So if you've ever dreamt of something that later came true, don't rush to fear it, label it mystical, or brush it off as random. See it instead as a reminder. There is a quiet intelligence within you, a gatekeeper that lives between symbols and reality, always trying to connect the two. And sometimes, a dream doesn't arrive to predict doom. It arrives to say, you were never disconnected from the deeper current of the universe. You are part of it, and it's still whispering to you every night. Dreams as a map of the unconscious, Jung and the journey back to the true self, when life feels directionless. When reason no longer leads to peace, dreams often become the final door back to the self. Carl Jung devoted his life to studying dreams not as random mental films, but as sacred codes from the unconscious, illuminating the path toward the self, the whole. Unfragmented identity, untouched by social roles or masks. To Jung, dreams serve a special function, compensating for the imbalances of consciousness. When you live too far from your feelings, chase achievements blindly, or drown in unacknowledged sadness, dreams arise as messengers announcing that you've strayed from your center. They don't judge or instruct. They offer images hazy, sometimes frightening, but always holding a piece of truth forgotten by the conscious mind. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are. And in that journey, dreams are not linear maps from point A to B. They are symbolic maps, where every image, scene, or emotion in a dream represents a dialogue between the ego and the deeper self. For example, someone dreams of getting lost in a forest. To the untrained mind, it's just anxiety. But for those who've learned to listen, it may symbolize inner disorientation where reason no longer guides, and the way home can only be found through intuition and feeling. In therapy, Jung never rushed to decode dreams with formulas. He treated each one like a poem, not to impose meaning, but to awaken the dreamer's own understanding. There is no dream without meaning, he said, only impatience in the listener. Dreams show us what we've avoided. They may present a question, a direction, or sometimes a challenge, and if you walk with it without fear, without rushing to analyze, you will find that the dream is a companion in awakening. Many ask, what should I do with my dream? Jung's answer was not to interpret it, but to live with it. Respond to it in action or emotion. Dreams don't want to be understood. They want to change you, not in thoughts, but in how you live. So when you wake from a dream that leaves you disturbed, moved, or shaken, don't dismiss it. It might be the first whisper from a deep part of yourself, calling you home, not to become someone else, but to return to who you truly are, uncut, unmasked, unperformed. And at that point, the nightmare is no longer darkness. It becomes the first light you see when turning inward. When you wake up inside a dream and dare to consciously enter the darkness, there's a strange and magical moment in some dreams when you suddenly realize that you're dreaming no longer a passive character. You become fully aware that you're in another world. This is known as lucid dreaming. And in that state, you're no longer just an actor in the unconscious script. You begin to converse with it. But this isn't about taking control of the dream, at least not in the usual sense. The deeper purpose is to enter the dream as a sacred rite of awareness, to face what you normally flee when you know you're dreaming and still choose not to run. You're engaging in a profoundly spiritual act, meeting your own darkness with the light of consciousness. A woman once described a recurring nightmare every night. A faceless shadow chased her through an endless hallway. She ran terrified and exhausted, but one night, in the middle of fleeing, she realized, I'm dreaming. Instead of running, she stopped, turned around, and faced the shadow. You can't hurt me, she shouted. The shadow froze, then slowly vanished. She woke up no longer with the feeling of being chased, but with a sense of liberation. That wasn't magic. It was the effect of facing the fear, in-depth psychology. This is a core principle. What is denied will haunt. What is faced will begin to dissolve. Lucid dreaming, and a method Carl Jung called active imagination, are both powerful tools to connect with the unconscious, not to control it, but to listen. When you continue the unfinished story of your dream, imagine yourself speaking to the characters, or re-enter the scene after waking. You are giving your inner world a chance to finish telling its story. Many analysts emphasize dreams and imagination come from the same source, the unconscious. So when you wake from a meaningful dream, write it down, or simply close your eyes and imagine what would happen next if I hadn't woken up. This is not a mind game, it's a form of deep healing, because when you allow a repressed part of yourself to continue its path, it's no longer trapped, it starts to transform. Not everyone can lucid dream easily, but you can train your awareness by keeping a dream journal, practicing reality checks during the day, and staying curious about what appears in your dreams. Because what matters most is not whether the dream is real or imagined, but what it teaches you and how it changes you once you emerge from it. So if one day you find yourself awake inside your own dream, don't run. Step forward, not as a warrior looking to win, but as a seeker looking to understand, because at the end of that hallway, there may not be a monster. There may be a part of you waiting to be seen, embraced, and brought home. When beauty is born from hell, Beksinski and Giger painting with their own darkness. Some artists don't seek the light to create beauty, they dive into darkness, into horror, into the deepest obsessions, and from there, build worlds that make us shudder. And marvel. Zdzislaw Beksinski and H.R. Giger were such artists. Both turned their nightmares into art, not to escape fear, but to transform it into a language of raw emotion. Beksinski, the Polish painter, created haunting post-apocalyptic landscapes. No one feels comforted when looking at his work. Deformed beings, decaying structures, lifeless bodies. Yet within the ruin, there's a strange beauty, as if death, decay, and melancholy are part of the journey back to the self. He never named his paintings, never explained them, because to him, horror doesn't need words, it speaks in its own shape. H.R. Giger, from Switzerland, was the mind behind the alien creature in the Alien films, but his work went far beyond cinema. He fused the human body with machines, creating a biomechanical universe where humanity and technology merged in existential terror. Giger's paintings emerged from his nightmares, his fear of birth and death, of flesh and dependency. What's remarkable is that neither Beksinski nor Giger tried to explain away their darkness. They dialogued with it through art, and that's what made them the voice of what society rejects in their paintings. We see ourselves raw, fragile, longing to be understood. Not everyone is an artist, but everyone carries darkness. And art, whether through writing, drawing, music, or simply sitting in silence with our emotions, can be the bridge that turns nightmare into expression, fear into something touchable, feelable, and slowly healable. Because sometimes, beauty isn't born from the light. It's born from the place we thought held no more hope. Don't fear nightmares. They might be the first time you truly meet yourself. There's a simple truth we often forget. Nightmares are not the enemy. They don't come to destroy you. They come to awaken the part of you that has been asleep, hurt, denied, or silent for too long, and maybe in the dream where you scream, run, or are chased. What the monster wants most is just for you to look at it. In the language of depth psychology, what you fear in a dream is often your shadow self, the part of your ego repressed, because it doesn't fit your ideal image. It might be anger, weakness, forbidden desire, or a memory you're afraid to face, and when you keep ignoring it in waking life, it finds another way to return through nightmares. But here's the paradox. When we face the shadow, it often isn't as terrifying as we imagined. Many people have described awakening within a dream where they stop running, turn, and face the being chasing them, and something unexpected happens. The monster pauses, speaks, even, vanishes, not because it disappeared, but because it was acknowledged. You cannot heal what you continue to run from in dreams. Especially nightmares are the bravest mirrors the mind has ever made. They won't let you fake. They won't let you hide. They place you in a moment where there's nowhere to escape. And at that moment, you can begin the most important journey, the journey of meeting yourself again. You may have thought you were strong because you didn't dream, didn't fear, but true strength lies in this: the ability to feel fear without letting it control you, the courage to embrace the darkness without being consumed by it, the honesty to say, "This too is a part of me," and from there, walk forward as a more complete, deeper, truer self. So next time a nightmare comes, don't banish it too quickly. Ask instead, what part of me is trying to speak? Who is knocking from within? Maybe it's not something terrifying. Maybe it's the most honest version of you, waiting to be heard. Nightmares don't betray you, they simply alert you to what you haven't dared to see. We often think of nightmares as a betrayal of the mind, as if the brain is turning against us in sleep. But when we look deeper, we see the opposite. Nightmares don't betray you, they protect you, in their own way, in a world driven by speed, expectations, and the relentless pressure to be fine. There are countless things we choose to ignore: chronic exhaustion, loneliness, a sense of meaninglessness, or personal boundaries we've crossed for too long. These things don't disappear, they just retreat to the background, accumulating in the unconscious. And then, when you lie down, when the noise of the outer world fades away, the inner voice finally gets a chance to speak. It doesn't speak in words, but in images, emotions, and a panic you can't pretend to ignore. Nightmares are the mind's final alarm system. They don't come to hurt you, they come to stop you from continuing to flee from yourself. And if you have the courage to listen in that chaotic dream, you may uncover a truth you've long forgotten, but that never truly left. Every nightmare holds a message, but are you willing to read it? Nightmares are not meaningless fragments of the mind. They are letters from the unconscious, written in the language of symbols, emotions, and intuition. Every disturbing dream is an encrypted message about what you're avoiding, what you haven't admitted, or what is calling to be healed. But the bigger question is, are you willing to open that letter? Many people try to forget their nightmares the moment they wake up. But if you can stay calm enough to write down what you saw, to ask questions about each image, each feeling, you'll realize they are far from meaningless. A locked room might be a forgotten memory. A crying child might be an emotional part of you that has never been comforted. Try writing the dream down the morning after. Don't try to interpret it right away. Just record it, then return to it a few days later with a new mindset. The question isn't, is it right or wrong? But how did it make you feel? What does it remind you of that you've been ignoring in your waking life? Because sometimes the very thing that woke you in the middle of the night is the thing that most needs to be heard. From nightmare to light, the journey back to your true self. No one wants to face nightmares, but it's often in those darkest dreams that you find what the light alone can't reveal: the path back to yourself. A nightmare is not the end. It's the beginning of an inner journey. From avoidance to confrontation, from fleeing to listening, from fear to understanding. Each time you dare to look into what terrifies you, you reclaim a piece of your strength that was once lost. Carl Jung called this process individuation, becoming a whole human being, not a perfect self, but an honest one who knows they have a shadow, but is not ruled by it, who knows they carry wounds, but still moves forward with an open heart. Nightmares teach us that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about learning to live with it fully and meaningfully. And true light doesn't come from denying the darkness, but from walking through it, carrying with you a small lantern of awareness. Because sometimes the place you fear most is where you'll rediscover yourself most deeply and beautifully. Nightmares aren't flaws of the mind. They are calls, sometimes loud, sometimes faint, reminding you that something inside remains untouched. And if you're brave enough not to turn away, you'll find every nightmare is not an end, but an invitation to return to your deepest, most authentic self. And sometimes the very first light you see comes from the darkness you once feared the most.